goes everywhere.
Like it's open to our property, goes across the road, the veins open there.
Yep.
Then
Well, then, and actually, that's what they get ready to open the bid on that project. The main goes all the way through rural, in front of those two hog barns, goes through their front yard. We already did that portion of it. And then it just has a bunch of tributaries all through there. Like 25,000 feet. So, that's what they're doing.
where's it empty?
It empties into that open ditch that goes down through you.
Well, after it goes through us,
You know, I don't know.
I wonder if anybody.
Yeah, I mean, does that end up in Coal Creek? Is that be right?
Well, there's Turkey Run Creek
Yeah.
that goes east-west across 25.
Oh, yeah.
You go out to 25 and go north to Wingate, go half a mile or so west, go to Turkey Run Creek. I thought maybe it emptied into it, but
call the meeting to order. I'm Doug Mills. I'll be chairman today as Dave Rhoads is unable to be here. Let us all stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. We'll move on to the approval of the minutes. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes from the May 21st meeting?
Move to approve the May minutes.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on, we will have the bid opening for the Joseph Conway number 700. Tom?
Yes, I just wanted to let the board know also today we are streaming on YouTube for the first time for the Drainage Board meeting, so it would probably be a good idea to go through and introduce everybody because they can't see your nameplates on the camera. So if you want to start doing that, I'll start opening the bids. I'm Tom Cummins, the county surveyor.
I'm Dan Taylor. I'm the board attorney.
Matt Mitchell.
Jake Bohlander, member.
Doug Mills, vice chairman.
Lance Sennett.
Okay, so moving forward on the agenda, the bid opening for the Joseph Conway reconstruction. I'll go ahead and put the construction estimate up on the screen here for the board to follow along. So on the screen here, you can see the construction estimate for the Joseph Conway. First bid received from Arthur's Excavating in the amount of $508,011.20. That's 508-01120. And the second bid is from Maxwell Farm Drainage in the amount of $505,063 even. That's 505,063. And those were the only two bids received for the Joseph Conway. If the board would like to recess for 5 minutes while I review these and make sure they're both responsive to the bid packet, then I should be able to come back with a recommendation. Okay, after reviewing both bids were responsive to the bid packet. The recommendation would be to approve the Maxwell Farm Drainage, Inc. bid in the amount of $505,063 even. And I'll answer any questions you might have.
What was the engineering fee for this?
So here on this page, you can see a breakdown of the actual total estimate. So this is the amount that was actually approved at the reconstruction hearing. So the engineering is $26,300. So the reconstruction was approved at an estimate of $658,163.50.
Including the contingency.
Yes, correct. The 15% contingency and the engineering.
Are there any questions in regard to the bid from Maxwell for $505,063? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve that bid for the Joseph Conway number 700 drainage ditch project.
Move to approve the bid for Maxwell Farm Drainage.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Lance abstains.
Mr. Acting Chairman, we have the bid sheet for you to sign as well.
Just him.
Yes.
That all we have on that, Tom?
Yes, that's all for the Joseph Conway under the bid opening.
Moving on to petitions, we have the Albert High Song number 618.
Yes, as you will remember, thanks contractors. If you remember last month, we had a petition request from Mr. Noah Moore-Binge, a petition for a variance to the right-of-way. He wants to install a private crossing on a regulated open ditch, the Albert High Song. Based on his design and his petition, the issue was tabled to this meeting because I had some concerns about the size of the pipe he was wanting to install. I'll just pull it up on the map here to show you. So the blue line represents the Albert High Song drain. So the red circle will show you where Mr. Moore-Binge is wanting to install the 60-inch pipe per his design. The concern was, so this is where his structure is going to go. If you follow downstream, the first crossing under a county road, the bridge structure at that county road is a 4-foot tall by 12-foot wide concrete structure. And then just downstream of that, it crosses another county road, and there are actually two 60-inch pipes side by side under that road. So based on the size of those structures immediately downstream, I had concerns about the size of the 60-inch. So I asked the board to table that till this meeting, gave me a chance to have some engineers look at it to determine, whether that's an adequate size or whether it's something we need to be concerned about. In talking with the engineers and talking with the attorney and talking with the building department, the issue that we're running into here is we don't actually have a standard for what we require for a private crossing of this nature. Historically, in the past, we've used just the old slide rules to tell you, this is how much acreage, this is how much grade you have, this is what size pipe should work. We're relying on structures that the county highways put in. Those are put to a certain standard. What we need to do is we need to figure out what standard are we going to hold landowners to for these structures going forward in the future. When the engineers look at it, they design based on a 100-year storm. The reason being is if this were a private open ditch, if this were not regulated, and that landowner wanted to put a crossing in that open ditch, they would be required to work with DNR through that. They would be required to permit through DNR, and DNR would require them to size that pipe for the 100-year storm. Mainly because FEMA requires the 100-year storm for structures, and DNR kind of piggybacks off of FEMA requirements. So the question before the board today, and going forward obviously, is what standard do we want to set for these private crossings that these landowners want to put in? And how do we make that either a drainage board policy, or do we incorporate that into the county's stormwater policy? These are answers I need from the board before being able to move forward with this situation right here, because again, the structure that he has proposed does not meet the 100-year storm. It doesn't even meet the 10-year storm. Now, when it comes to county road structures, again, the standard that's used for those is not really written in stone either. I would say that if you took an average of all of the county road structures, culverts like this, most of them on average are probably between the 1 and 3 year storms is the most that they can handle. You do have some outliers that maybe might meet the 5-year storm, but none of them are even close to the 100-year storm. So moving forward, we need some sort of policy, ordinance, resolution, whatever, so that we can be safe in knowing that we're treating all landowners fairly and consistently. The board has allowed structures in the past that didn't meet the 100-year storm. There was no real thought process put into it. Generally, the easiest way to figure out what size those structures need to be is just like what we did here. Look at the closest structure downstream and the closest structure upstream of wherever the proposed area is. And that gives you a pretty good idea of how that structure needs to be sized, at least to maintain the status quo of what's in the ditch currently. Now, I can tell you with the 100-year storm, engineers, when they look at something like this, they don't take everything into account. They are looking strictly at watershed, grade, and ditch characteristics. What they don't take into account is like when a ditch meanders, you're losing force and flow that way. So it changes the dynamic of what is in that open ditch. So again, the cosmetic viewpoint of here's the watershed, here's the grade, here's what size that structure needs to be, might not be enough for us to be able to build a policy around making sure that, again, we're treating everybody consistently and fairly. So if we required the gentleman there to put the structure in that would meet the 100-year storm, it would be a 7-foot by 6-foot or 7-foot by 5-foot concrete structure. Now, that is an extremely expensive structure to purchase as well as install. So the question to the board is, what standard, what storm event are we comfortable requiring for situations like this? That was a lot of information I threw at you. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have or pass on ones that I can't and get you answers for. But again, I don't know that necessarily we're able to make a decision on this specific issue today, but we at least need to start the conversation so that we're not holding him up or any other future requests like this in the future. So again, I'll open it up for some conversation and discussion.
Do you know what any other counties are doing?
Other counties have not addressed this issue. This is not something that anybody has been willing to put pen to paper on. And again, it's because exactly what I laid out. For us to cover ourselves legally, drainage-wise, if I were putting that structure, if I needed to put a structure in that ditch as part of the maintenance of that drain, I would size it for the 100-year storm. But I have a drain fund to pay for that work. It's not one landowner paying for it all on their own. So I don't think the 100-year storm I think that's kind of overkill. But again, we have to be able to protect ourselves. We have to make sure that we're not creating a situation where landowners upstream, their tiles that are going into that ditch could be underwater because that structure is holding back water more than what it would have without that structure in there. Again, these are all things that need to go into this decision-making process. So that's why I wanted to start the conversation with the board, because again, I'm not comfortable enough to make a determination on that, and I don't think we have enough information to actually make a determination on that.
Well, my comment would be, and I guess to Dan, is just to be fair for everyone, fair to landowners, fair to the drainage board and county in general, we need some sort of standards. And so otherwise we're just throwing knives at the wall, darts at the wall, whatever, and hope it sticks. And so I have no problem with continuing this while this process is examined further, and maybe at some point between you and Dan, come back with some recommendation that you feel is fair and protective of both sides.
Do we have any sort of cost estimate for like a 5 or 10-year storm? What size pipe that would be?
We did have the engineers work up just a kind of I didn't want to go real in-depth with it because obviously this is money out of the drain fund, so I didn't want to go real elaborate with looking into, and that's the thing is when you're designing for a storm event, it's not that, it seems like it would be very easy to say, okay, well, this is a 100-year storm, this meets a 100-year storm, so what if I just wanted to meet the 50-year storm, just cut the size in half? It just doesn't work that way. Drainage doesn't work that way. So, but the report that was put together by the engineers, I'll pull it up here and we can kind of go through it a little bit. It's not it.
I suppose at minimum, it would be, as you said before, what is immediately downstream, so that whatever would pass through those culverts would pass through the one that's going in. That would be the minimum.
That was kind of where I, wanted to kind of start with the idea of, well, what if we just require them to match the size of whatever structure is immediately downstream? But again, even that in a case like this is pretty consequential for the landowner because again, the next structure downstream is a 4-foot high by 12-foot wide culvert. So again, that's going to run you about the same as what a 7x5 or 7x6 would cost you basically. So that is definitely something that is at least a starting point. Again, for me, it's always what's downstream, what's upstream, happy medium between the two. That's not an engineering standard, that's just my, methodology in my brain.
But on this one, it doesn't look like there's probably one upstream.
Yeah, the open ditch just
you're
starts
gonna run into that
upstream of him. So yeah, you don't really have an upstream structure to use as a barometer. You basically just have everything that's downstream. So what they did was they ran, based on the 60-inch that the landowner has proposed, what they did was looked at that in reference to the 100-year storm. So again, I'm going to try not to make you go cross-eyed with information here, but so based on the 100-year storm in that open ditch, after a 100-year storm, they expect that the flow would be 534.87 cubic feet per second. So after a 100-year storm, that's how much water is running through that ditch. The 60-inch pipe that they have proposed has 110.58 cubic feet per second capacity. So you're talking about a fifth of what is actually running through there. And again, the impetus behind this is we want to protect ourselves. We also want to protect the landowners. We don't want to tell the landowners, sure, go ahead and put that in, and then the first time we have a heavy rain, it blows it out, then we're somewhat liable for that. So again, all of these things have gone into this decision-making process. But so the 60-inch pipe has a 110.58 cubic feet per second capacity. So then they modeled the two side-by-side 60s, like is what we have on County Road, what is that, 1100 East? 1025 East. So the structures, the actual downstream end, the outlet end of what we consider the regulated drain. So there are two 60-inch side-by-side culverts at that location. Even the two side-by-side 60s only gives you 221.16 cubic feet per second capacity, so less than half of what the 100-year storm is expected to bring. So you have to at some point even realize that even county road structures are designed to, they're expecting overflow. They're expecting road to overtop those culverts. But again, they're crunched on a budget, purpose. So during the 100-year storm, again, 534 cubic feet, and you only get 221 out of the 260s. So then they modeled a 7x5 concrete culvert for that structure that Mr. Moore-Benj is proposing. That does meet the 100-year storm, but there's very little room left in the structure after the 100-year storm. So what they said was rather than a 7x5, they would recommend a 7x6 that leaves a little bit more freeboard for if anything above and beyond the 100-year storm were to happen.
Can we give a recommendation of like, hey, for a 100-year storm, this is what's recommended, but if you do something less? just know that,
If it were not regulated, yeah, the problem with it being regulated is that if we just say, here's what we recommend, you do whatever you want to do, then we have the issue of if they do something extremely small, then you're holding water upstream, and then we have an issue that we've created for landowners upstream. So that's where it gets a little murky at that point.
Gotcha.
Again, if it weren't a regulated drain, it would be a whole different issue. But the fact that it's regulated, we have a responsibility to everybody in that watershed.
And I talked about this in training earlier in the year, but there is a case out there that talks about, what is the standard we're supposed to be designing to? There's a case that came out of Valparaiso that said, where the county said, look, we had that designed to the 100-year storm event. That's what everybody does. That's what DNR does. That's what FEMA does. That's the standard. The court said, you're right. You cannot plan for everything. And even the 100-year event, we have events that exceed that frequently, actually. It's not like that never happens. But there has to, the courts bought the argument that there has to be some standard that you design to. And then the cases have also said that if we put or allow structures to be in legal drain and they cause damage to landowners, we're on the hook. So this liability concern is real. I think Tom's concept, which is really, it's all about impact. So that is to look upstream and look downstream. I think he's on the right track, and I don't know that we have to hold every structure to the 100-year standard, although that's the safe harbor. So I think it's going to require some study, but on the other hand, as you all know, if you have a structure like this and you allow something that's less than 100-year, so let's say you don't go 7 by 6, and you say, let's put dual 60 inches there or something like that, because that's consistent with what's downstream, and that's an equivalent of 40% of the 100-year. Where does that get you? Well, again, I think if we can say what our rationale was for our standard, if we're looking at impacts upstream and downstream, we're probably on the right track. And I think the board does want to be fair with everybody, and you should always try to do that. But again, there's this liability thing out there we have to also, be protective of. We could, as a condition of a variance, this landowner's asked for a variance. We could say, or we could have a policy that says if the landowner requests a variance that is not compliant with the 100-year flood standard, they have to indemnify us. Now that indemnification may be worth something, it may not be, but that's what some people do, is they say, well, we'll grant this, but if this doesn't work out very well, we at least want you to stand first in line because you're the one who asked for it.
Well, my question is, they put in 260s, for example, and you have that 100-year storm, and it wipes out that, it causes damage to the ditch, it gets down, it causes damage on the county roads, who's responsible? I mean, that's the whole problem, like I said, if the surveyor had to put it in order to conduct maintenance on the ditch, that's all part of it, and he can, like you said, that crossing would be paid for by the entire ditch. That's the problem, if you do this, damage occurs, now all of a sudden, is it the drain that's gonna pay for it, which is not gonna make people happy, or is it the landowner that's gonna have to pay for it? And so I think we just got a whole raft of things before we go down there, this road, that we need to have some standards and what we're going to do to protect all parties, now and in the future.
I agree, but I don't think we can expect the landowner to do more than what the county does.
No, that's one of the other cruxes. Again, we're relying on structures that weren't put to whatever standard that we're requiring the landowner. The other thing that I looked at was, and I spoke with the engineers a little bit about this after we got the report, was what is the benefit of looking at the ditch as it is right now, determining what storm event we're accomplishing with the ditch in its current state, and then match the structure to meet that same storm? Because at least then we can say we're not causing any obstruction in the ditch. The structure that he's putting in will meets the same standard that we've got currently. Now, again, that's all fine and good until that 100-year storm comes, and then you're right back where you started with.
And you can also then argue, look, we didn't make it any worse.
Right.
We basically we made it so that new structure did not affect what was already there. And I think that would make a difference. It goes to your point, Lance, and I think, that's why I say, I think there's some flexibility in creating a policy for these situations. These are kind of rare situations, but I think that if the surveyor could bring back a recommendation after some thought and ask you guys to consider it, then we could continue this. But I think there is some room in there to operate in something less than 100 year. We made it so that this change did not adversely affect anything. Had we not done anything and there'd been a 150-year event, we would have had problems anyway. You know, and that's kind of that's true and that's logical. And so I think there's some room, and it's a variance request for a reason. You know, they're saying, look, please don't make me follow the strict letter of the law. And so I like the idea of looking up, you know, upstream impacts, downstream impacts. What are the conforming structures in the drain downstream in this case? I think that if we tried to make it so we could answer to ourselves, we're not making things any worse. We're not creating an obstruction. We're not creating such a small path for the water to go through that it is any different than it is today. I think that, in fact, if we could make it just a tad better than today, it'd probably be better. But yeah, I don't think we probably, I think there may be some room to not make perfect the enemy of good.
I think I could, you know, it's something I could live with. I think the only thing we have to do is how we're going to, if we get that 100-year storm and because we allowed that size to go in, and then because of that damage, it gets wiped out, it creates damage downstream, then who is, because you have three entities involved. It gets shoved down next to the county road and causes damage there. You got the private landowner, you got the legal drain, and you got the county. And I think we have to make sure that when we do this, that very clear lines are separated so that we don't get in he said, she said, it's his fault, my fault, whatever. And we got to do as much as we can to at least establish a path of how that's all going to work. That's my concern.
Yeah, I think Dan's point was very good about, you know, we could get our policy in place when we make whatever decision we make. The approval for that request needs to spell out, based on a 100-year storm, this is what size structure is recommended. Here's what's minimum requirements based on our policy or ordinance or whatever. So this is the minimum you have to do, but make it very clear that they understand. You can try to make them understand. I can tell you this also comes from multiple instances of the past where landowners called me and said, hey, I had this crossing, you know, we had this rain event, blew it out. You guys, the drain's responsible for that. Well, then I go out and look at it and I see the structure was, you know, a tenth the size of what it needed to be for the ditch. So then I have to explain to the landowner, look, you put that structure in there, the board didn't. It failed because it was too small. It didn't fail because of tree removal or a large storm event. So again, these are all the things that I've seen, so I'm trying to account for these requests going forward in the future, so.
And you can impose conditions upon a variance, a grant of a variance. You could say, you know, we'll approve this, but if there's flooding to your property, you're going to sign this waiver that says you're not going to sue us because we didn't have to grant this variance, you requested it. You're going to have to indemnify us from any downstream or upstream claims. You know, there are things you could do with case by case. You could do some things to mitigate some of those if you chose to.
Well, first, do we need a motion to continue it?
Yes.
Okay, first, entertain a motion to continue this petition.
I had a couple thoughts before we do that, but not only how we come up with the diameter size we need, but probably need a minimum length size, because a lot of guys put 5-footers in and they don't have enough material to hold it down.
Yeah.
And then they go plug stuff up, so.
And the county highway does that for their driveway pipes. It's a required, it has to be at least 12 inches in diameter, and it has to be at least 30 feet long.
Right.
And that way you
To
know
hold it
that the
in.
ends don't end up crushed and
Now-
negate the pipe.
Another thought I had, what if we did instead of giving them an option in case it gets too large that they feel like they can't afford it, to do a drive-through with a rock bed driveway, to drive down in it and drive back out of it. There's no obstruction that you gotta worry
I
about,
both love those and
But-
hate those.
but have a standard
Right.
that it's gotta be
Right.
30 foot wide
Right.
or 20 or whatever it is, and it's gotta be bedded down with number 2s or whatever we need to do.
Yeah, I mean, with those, what we call wet bridges,
Mm-hmm.
again, I love those and I hate those because, again, it's less obstructing than any kind of structure. Even a structure size for a 100-year storm, when you put it in the ditch, it is by definition, it's an obstruction because you filled in the ditch. Now, the idea is make the pipe big enough that you allow the same flow. But with the wet bridges, they require maintenance, which a lot of people do them and then they just keep driving through them and never give it another thought. The maintenance part of it isn't concerning to me as, again, like you said, what's the bedding? What are you doing it out of? Because a lot of guys will just make a crossing, throw some river rock in the bottom and say, good. Well, the bottom of that open ditch carries water all the time, so it's not a really solid foundation. So if it's done right, if you dig down and
have
actually put a
standards if
bedding
we're
into
gonna
it,
do-
right.
If we offer that option,
Right,
have a
right.
standard that it's gotta be dug
But
out.
the other issue to consider with the wet bridges is if we have a 100-year storm and fills up that ditch, that's also a place where water can get out of the ditch. You can get through it, but it also gives a place for the water to get out. So again, there's that issue on
But
that
it
those
is
as
their
well.
property.
Right,
I mean-
right. That's really the thing is making, what we have to do is approach this in a way that makes the landowner understand that whatever we do, whatever our policy, whatever we approve, the impact of that is actually more on them than anybody else. Because again, if you put it in too small, it's gonna blow out and you've wasted all that money, So again, these are all the things that kind of have to go into creating some sort of policy, something we can hang our hat on to say, here's the way we do this on every case, not just this guy, we're not picking on this guy, and that's really what my goal is here today.
Well, in order to move forward, I mean, we've hit this a lot. This motion would be a two-step. One, entertain a motion to continue this petition. The second would be is for Tom and Dan to continue to figure out, come back with some sort of plan that we can use moving forward with various options, and also entertain to protect all parties involved. I would entertain that motion. Anybody wants to?
So moved on 2 or 3 of them.
Second.
All those in favor of the motion to continue position and for Tom and Dan to look at options?
All right.
Aye.
Anything else?
Just real quick, can the board give me and Dan some direction of, I mean, from the comments that have been made, it seems like you guys are kind of in the same mindset as I am. We don't want to require a landowner to have to spend tens of thousands of dollars to put a crossing in a ditch, when normally it's, a lot of times it's for farm machinery. This doesn't appear to be a farm machinery crossing. So this may be something where I go back to him and say, you're better off just building a bridge over it and not doing a crossing, because then it's out of our hands. We don't have to worry about it, but it depends on what he's using the crossing for. He did email me yesterday late afternoon to say he wasn't going to be able to be at the meeting today, so I told him we would discuss it and I would get back with him and let him know what was decided. So, but for my mind, again, if the county highway is using the 1 to 3, sometimes 5-year standard, is that kind of the direction they would like to see this head in? Or
I think with comments that Lance made, I don't think it.
Well, Tom texted me, can't hear you.
Oh, okay. I think with comments that Lance made and what has been made is that we look at upstream and downstream, no better, no worse. Is where you start, and then go from there. That's my comments.
That give you a direction?
yeah, but then the first logical question is, what if you're using a structure that you can look at and see that it's undersized, but that is what you're supposed to use as your standard? Because there's a lot of those in the county.
We do the best we can.
Okay. We'll work that out, yeah. Okay.
There is another situation in an open ditch where there's a crossing like this, but it's along an interstate. So if we go by those, oh my.
Yeah, if you're in the state road right away, then our hands are tied as far as they're gonna make them, well, NDOT standards aren't quite as strict as DNR and FEMA. NDOT generally, you're looking at 1 to 3, 5 years, basically what they, now those are the structures they're putting in. If it's a landowner that's required to put it, I'm sure they'd put a much higher standard on it. But we'll take that into account. I wanna see what the standards are for all the state and government agencies, because that helps me to kind of, again, the whole thing is making sure that whatever standard we set is covering ourselves on a liability standpoint, as well as making sure that we're not causing issues for drainage in the upstream portions of those watersheds.
Did we had motion to approve, did we vote on it, that motion?
Yeah. I thought we did.
I thought we had motions.
We voted.
We voted.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear on that. Okay, I think we've discussed that topic enough. We will move forward. Any other old business that needs to be brought forward? Hearing none. New business? Hearing none. Other business would be the 2025 classifications and long-term plan. Tom?
Yeah, so I've given each of the board members a copy of the regulated drain classification report and long-range plan. This is a report that's required by the Drainage Code annually for the board. Not only gives us a direction moving forward on most of the drains as far as maintenance goes, but also delineates which drains are classified as in need of reconstruction, and then goes farther to set an actual schedule of reconstruction for those drains. So I won't dwell on that too long. I just want to kind of go through it with you real quick so you can answer any questions you might have.
Any questions? My only comment is that for all landowners who are here, if they would relay to their friends and neighbors that the ditches that are on the schedule for 26 and 27, it's there. So I just assume not here, well, I never knew anything about this. It is out there, and so just relay this information. Anybody you know that is on those ditches would be greatly appreciated.
And this report will be made available on the county's website under the surveyor's website. So give landowners a chance to prepare for that.
Anything else on that, Tom?
Just to clarify, though, there's no drains in need of vacating at this time, so I would ask that the board approve this report as submitted.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the drain classification and long-range plan from the 2025 from the surveyor.
So moved.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Any other public comment? Hearing none, the next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, July 9th at 9:30 in this room. If there is nothing else, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?